Have you ever wondered why some NASA probes simply disappeared into space without leaving a trace? Billionaire missions, state-of-the-art equipment, cutting-edge technology developed by scientists who have spent years designing advanced communications systems, smart thrusters, heat shields. All this to simply lose the signal, just like that, out of nowhere. In NASA's public archives, there are pages and pages of technical data. But when you start to dig deeper, you find gaps, missing lines, times that don't match, inconclusive reports. And the most bizarre thing? No real statement from the agency about what really happened to probes like the Mars Observer, too mysterious Phobos 2, or even the forgotten Beagle 2. They disappeared. But why? This type of space blackout is not just a technical error. When we talk about projects monitored 24 hours a day, with millions of dollars in investments and dozens of engineers in real time controlling every detail, it doesn't make sense to simply say, "We lost contact." And then the mystery begins. What NASA doesn't want you to know. Why do entire missions disappear without a trace? And there is total silence. Some independent researchers claim that the probes were about to record something that should never be revealed. Others believe that there is interference from external forces, which go far beyond our understanding. And there are still those who say that this is all part of a top-secret program, where only a small elite within NASA know what is being done, or found out there in the void of space. And the most curious thing is that every time one of these stories comes to light, they are quickly discredited, labeled as conspiracy theories, as if we were crazy for asking simple questions. Where are the final images? Where is the telemetry data? Who was really behind these missions? Because one thing is certain, something is wrong. And perhaps the answer lies precisely in the missions that no one talks about. And that's why this video needs to be watched until the end. This information does not circulate through official channels, does not appear in the headlines, and is constantly suppressed. There is a pattern of silence that repeats itself every time a NASA mission ends mysteriously. There are lost signals, disconnected probes, incomplete reports. Coincidence? Difficultly. Keeping the public uninformed is an efficient way to avoid questions. And the less said, the easier it is to hide. It is essential that this information reaches more people. The truth about what really goes on behind the scenes at NASA needs to be revealed. So, if you value content that investigates what you prefer to hide, leave a like right now. This helps this video break the barrier of silence. And subscribe to the channel, because with each new episode, we will bring you hidden documents, deep investigations, and theories that you won't find anywhere. We're not just here to tell stories. We are here to connect the pieces that were left aside, to put together the censored fragments and reconstruct what really happened. Because while the official version is silent, the truth screams in the details that no one wants to show. Billion-dollar missions, calculated to the millimeter, developed by entire NASA teams, disappeared into the void of space as if they had never existed. We are talking about probes designed with the highest aerospace technology, equipped with state-of-the-art sensors, redundant communication systems, automated programming, and strict safety protocols. Everything supervised by control rooms that don't miss a single millisecond of telemetry. And even then, they just disappear. It's not as if they were mere experimental satellites. We are talking about ships with specific objectives, such as studying the atmospheres of other planets, mapping unknown surfaces, looking for signs of microscopic life. Missions with clear scientific objectives, which generated million-dollar budgets, put pressure on international agencies, and generated global expectations. Suddenly, an inexplicable failure, absolute silence. And that's it. The mission is considered finished. No press conference. No deep investigation. No charge. NASA just says it lost the signal, and the world just accepts it. But not here. Because behind every technical failure, there is a pattern, a repetition that raises suspicions. Some of these disappearances occurred shortly before the probes. Reached areas considered strategic, regions with unusual geological formations, anomalous electromagnetic signals, or unusual thermal patterns. Interestingly, many of these areas were never explored again. Others simply disappeared from NASA's priority map. Have you ever stopped to think why there are no final images? No last broadcast. No thorough analysis of the latest data received. Where are the backup files? Where are the engineers responsible for monitoring every signal pulse coming from these probes? The answer they give us is generic, cold, standardized. There was a communication failure. The equipment did not respond to commands. The probe lost contact. But the question you should be asking yourself is, what exactly were they about to find? Many of these missions seem to be in the way of something relevant. Information that never reached the public. Reports that were summarized in a few lines without context. Data that mysteriously could not be recovered. It's impossible not to be suspicious, and the same narrative is repeated with different names, with years of distance between them, but with the same nebulous outcomes. We are facing something bigger, something carefully managed so as not to arouse suspicion. Now, just imagine how many visual records could have been captured by these probes before their disappearance. What if some of these images showed something that could never be released? An artificial structure on Martian soil, a symmetrical pattern on Jupiter's moons, a signal coming from a fixed point in deep space. This is not fantasy. These are real possibilities. And it is precisely this type of content that is often hidden beneath layers and layers of bureaucracy, technical terms, and indecipherable reports. There are those who say that these missions were deliberately aborted, that the probes were turned off at the exact moment to prevent them from recording anything. And this raises an even darker suspicion. Who is deciding what can and cannot be revealed? Within NASA itself, there are levels of security that only a few have access to. Programs that do not appear on official websites. Documents that require special authorizations. Crypted internal communications. In a universe where everything can be manipulated digitally, how can we trust what we are shown? There is a very fine line between scientific truth and the construction of a controlled public narrative. And every time a space mission ends abruptly with vague explanations, we move further away from a real understanding of what is being done out there. Space becomes not just an inhospitable territory, but a field of concealment, where what cannot be explained is simply ignored, and what should not be revealed is silenced. Think about it. You've never seen real images from the surface of Phobos, Mars' mysterious moon, following the loss of contact by the Soviet probe and NASA's own mission. You've never seen the full Mars Observer data. You have never seen a detailed report on what led Beagle to silence just a few meters from the Martian soil. And even years later, the answers are still missing. Why doesn't anyone talk about this subject? Why have these cases disappeared from even the most serious scientific debates? The truth is that when data bothers you, it is not corrected. It is deleted, forgotten, buried under other news. And the scariest thing is realizing that this has been happening for decades. It is not an isolated error. It's a systematic pattern. And that's exactly why this type of content needs to circulate. Because there is an elite controlling the flow of information. An invisible structure deciding what you can and cannot know. And the more aware we are of this, the harder it will be to hide the missing pieces. With each video like this, more people wake up to the fact that NASA, behind the public image of science and progress, may be keeping untold secrets. Now that you're part of this investigation, tell me, Which of these missions do you find most suspicious? Comment below. It could just be the name of the probe: Phobos 2, Beagle 2, Mars Observer. Or if you want to go further, right? The truth is in the shadows. This way, I will know that you are with me this far, and that you are ready to go deeper into this story. And if you haven't left a like yet, now is the time. This helps this video pierce the bubble and show the algorithm that there is an audience wanting to know what NASA doesn't tell us. And if you've made it this far, subscribe to the channel now, because what comes next will change your worldview. Now take a deep breath, because the next point in this investigation is even more disturbing. Now that you understand the context, it's time to take a closer look at the real cases. Space missions that simply disappeared, as if they had been erased from existence. But we are not talking about simple operational failures or forgotten projects. We are talking about recorded events monitored in real time that left traces, and many of them still without official explanation. And when it comes to NASA, nothing is by chance. Everything is documented. And precisely for this reason, the silence surrounding these missions screams even louder. Let's start with one of the most emblematic: the Mars Observer. Launched in 1992, this probe was created to study Mars like never before. It carried highly sensitive instruments, high-resolution cameras, and sensors capable of mapping the red planet with absurd precision. The mission was promising. NASA had invested almost $1 billion in this project. Everything was going perfectly, until, just a few days before entering Mars orbit, contact was lost. Just like that. No sign of failure, no visible damage, no error messages. A clean disappearance, silent and without a trace. The official explanation was that there was a problem with the pressurization system. But here comes a curious detail. Even with this supposed failure, NASA was unable to recover absolutely any data from the probe's last moments. No error logs. No response to contingency commands. Nothing. Just silence. Does equipment of this magnitude, with redundancy in all systems, simply shut down, or was it turned off? Moving forward in time, we find the even stranger case of Phobos 2, a joint mission between the Soviet Union and NASA in 1988. This probe aimed to explore the moons of Mars, Phobos and Deimos. And everything was going well until she approached the surface of Phobos. It was at that moment that she captured an image that created a real stir. An elongated, cylindrical-shaped object positioned below the moon's orbit. Minutes after registration, contact was lost, forever. No other data was received, and the image was quickly archived, discredited, and forgotten. To this day, experts try to explain what exactly Phobos photographed. NASA itself avoided commenting on the case publicly. The object did not resemble anything known. It wasn't a shadow, nor an image flaw. It was something real, physical, and had geometric symmetry. The kind of thing you don't expect to find on a scientific mission. What exactly was there? A ship? A structure? An alien artifact? Everything was treated as speculation. But the coincidence is too big to ignore. The probe lost contact precisely after capturing that image. Now, let's move on to the most recent case, and also one of the most disconcerting. That of Beagle 2. This mission was launched by the European Space Agency in partnership with NASA. The goal was to land on Mars and conduct a series of experiments to detect possible signs of microbial life. The mission was a success, until the moment of landing. After that, there was total silence. No signal from the probe, no images, no data. The world believed that it had crashed to the surface of the planet. For more than a decade, Beagle 2 was considered lost. But in 2015, satellite images revealed something surprising. The probe was there, intact, with part of its solar panels open, but without emitting any type of signal. The explanation was that the panels did not open fully, which prevented communication. But why didn't NASA ever investigate further? Why take so many years to analyze images of the surface of Mars that were already available? And most importantly, what could Beagle 2 have recorded before shut up? 3 missions, 3 stories with nebulous endings. 3 moments where the official narrative fails to convince, and they all have something in common. They happened when the probes were about to record crucial data. Details that could change what we know about Mars, space, and perhaps even the existence of intelligent life beyond Earth. It's as if there is an invisible line that cannot be crossed, as if someone or something decides what can be shown and what needs to be hidden. Now imagine how many other probes from different countries and agencies may have faced the same fate. How many signals were lost? How many contacts were cut at the exact moment, as if something was observing, controlling, or even interfering? It's not just an isolated case. It's not just a technical error. It's a pattern. And when you start to connect these pieces, what emerges is a picture far more disturbing than any theory has ever dared to suggest. Comment below which of these missions caught your attention the most. Write Phobos 2 was silenced, or Beagle 2 knew too much. If you felt that there was something wrong with all this, or simply comment NASA hides. If you've been following this far and want this content to reach more people, your comment, however small it may seem, could be the trigger for more people to wake up to this reality that has been buried for years. NASA always offers technical, apparently rational explanations for the disappearances of its probes. Failures in communication systems, software errors, malfunction in the propulsion system, solar panel problems. The justification is almost always there, ready-made, presented in brief, direct, and cold communications. But when you start to look more closely at each of these reports, it is impossible to ignore the number of gaps, contradictions, and zones of silence that surround these events. Behind the technical language and scientific terms, there is a void, and this void, in most cases, is more revealing than any officially released data. In the case of the Mars Observer, the explanation was a supposed failure in the fuel pressurization system, but in independent reports, engineers who worked on similar projects claimed that such a failure would not be enough to cause a complete disappearance of the signal. Even if the ship lost its maneuverability, the communication system should remain active for at least a few more hours. However, in the case of Observer, contact was cut off abruptly without any warning. And stranger still, no subsequent attempts at triangulation were reported. No real effort to locate residual signals. It's just silence. A mission worth nearly $1 billion was declared lost overnight, with frightening ease, with Phobos 2. The official version never convincingly explained why the last image captured was precisely that of an unidentified object, with a cylindrical shape close to the surface of the moon of Mars. No official statement made mention of the content of the image. No NASA scientists were asked to answer questions about the matter in public. When journalists began to ask questions, the focus of the narrative was quickly diverted to the historical aspects of collaboration between space agencies. What should have been treated as one of the most enigmatic records in the history of space exploration was hushed up and reduced to a footnote. And the Beagle, too. The explanation for the failure of the solar panels seems too convenient. How does a probe land perfectly, remain intact on the Martian soil, and simply not be able to open its modules? And why take more than 10 years to discover this when the images that confirmed its location had already existed for a long time? Furthermore, if part of the panels were opened, there is a significant chance that it was able to record at least some data. So why haven't any partial logs been released? Why aren't there even records of attempts to manually connect to the equipment? The truth is, the more you try to understand these missions, the more questions arise. And NASA's stance adds even more to the mystery. Instead of opening the data for independent review of sharing as much as possible with the global scientific community, the agency adopts a behavior of containment, of limiting access, of exaggerated summary of the facts. Most documents released to the public come with hidden, redacted, and censored parts. If there's nothing to hide, why not release it all? Why hide? And it's not just physical files. Even the media coverage is, to say the least, strange. Missions that moved the world, that received massive investments, and that had ambitious objectives, disappear from the news as quickly as they disappear from space. You see a headline here, another there, and suddenly, total silence. No in-depth journalistic investigation. No interviews with key scientists. No real attempt to understand what actually happened. It's as if there was a tacit agreement. The subject is not mentioned, and this coordinated silence is one of the clearest signs that there is something much bigger behind it. This is where the real doubt comes in. What if these technical glitches are just window dressing? What if, behind the official version, there is a much more disturbing truth, much more risky, much more dangerous for the power structure that controls the large space agencies? A truth that, if revealed, could shake the narrative built around space exploration, something that would call into question public trust in science, institutions, and the frontiers of the unknown. This is not about belittling science, nor about denying space advances. It is about questioning the way in which information is filtered, shaped, packaged, and delivered to the public. There is a difference between science and controlling the narrative. And unfortunately, what we see in many of these cases is more control than science. By the way, have you tried looking for complete official reports about these missions on NASA websites? The number of incomplete documents, PDFs with broken links, files encrypted or blocked by special permissions is staggering. Many of these files can only be accessed with specific authorizations or through requests via the Access to Information Law. And even then, they are full of black stripes, hiding entire sections of the original content. Who decides what can be shown? Who selects which data reaches the public? And why are certain parts of these reports always the same ones to be censored? The sections where there are exact times, the precise location of the latest transmissions, the content of the raw images, always disappear. Always. And this is no coincidence. If you still think we're talking about simple operational failures, it's worth remembering that NASA has decades of experience in controlling unmanned spacecraft. These missions are tested in simulated environments, go through numerous review phases, and are monitored by hundreds of professionals. Nothing happens by chance. When a probe goes missing, it's not an intern's mistake. It's not a random bug. It's something big and very well controlled. The question remains, who is controlling what? And more importantly, why? Comment below what you think about this pattern of silence. Right? They silence the truth if you feel they are hiding something. Or, if you want to get straight to the point, type technical failure does not convince. Your comment could be what makes this video reach more people who are also tired of explanations that don't explain anything. If the technical explanation is not convincing, and the official reports are full of gaps, what is left is what many call a conspiracy theory, but which, for others, may simply be the beginning of the truth. After all, when data disappears, silence prevails, and authorities avoid debate. Doubt doesn't just arise. It settles, and that's where the narrative fragments, making room for hypotheses that NASA would never agree to discuss in public, but that have been raised behind the scenes for decades. One of the most consistent theories among independent experts is that these probes disappeared not because of internal failures, but because they recorded something they shouldn't have, something visual, energetic, or structural that went beyond the objectives of the mission. In other words, the equipment would have detected an anomaly, and this anomaly was considered too sensitive information to reach public knowledge. Images that were never released, audios that were supposedly leaked but soon disappeared, and above all, the agency's always repetitive behavior in situations like this: minimizing, redirecting, suppressing. There are documents that, even with black stripes hiding part of the content, suggest the involvement of special protocols when a mission does not respond as expected. One of these guidelines was mentioned by a former NASA employee anonymously in a forum of former space scientists and engineers. According to him, when a probe goes into emergency mode and starts sending unexpected data, such as geometric patterns, unexplained thermal variations, or visual records with anomalous brightness, communication can be intentionally interrupted. The name of this internal procedure: Red Dust Protocol. No one has ever confirmed the official existence of this protocol, but the simple fact that the name appears repeatedly in technical communities among former agency contractors already raises another red flag. Could this protocol be a kind of remote kill switch to prevent critical information from leaking? Another theory that has gained momentum in recent years is that some probes have been intercepted, not due to failures, not due to human errors, but due to unknown technology. A signal, an electromagnetic interference, something that knocked them out or took complete control of the system. And here we enter even denser territory: the possibility that there are intelligences beyond our own, aware of our presence and vigilant at every attempt to advance. Many researchers in the field of exopolitics, a field that studies the political implications of extraterrestrial life, believe that there is a kind of unstated limit to space exploration, a type of prohibited zone, where probes are systematically prevented from advancing, as if there was an invisible barrier, not physical, but monitored, as if humanity's every incursion into certain areas of the solar system was monitored, and, in some cases, blocked. Phobos to itself may be an example of this. Remember that image: the shadowy, cylindrical object perfectly aligned below the moon's orbit. Some experts say that object was about 20 kilometers long. Yes, you heard right. 20 kilometers. For comparison, it's longer than the length of some entire islands on Earth. And he was there. Static. Property. Like a sentry. If that doesn't make you question what really happened, nothing will. And if you're thinking that all this is an invention, it's worth remembering. Boris Belitsky himself, a scientific correspondent for Soviet television, even confirmed in a public broadcast back in the 1980s that Phobos 2 had captured something unusual moments before losing contact. This speech disappeared from the air for years, but it is still possible to find recorded excerpts shared by collectors of archival material. Why was this type of statement never highlighted in the final reports? Furthermore, reports are emerging that, in more recent missions, there were temporary signal cuts exactly at times when the probes were flying over regions considered critical, such as Valles Marineris on Mars and specific areas of the Moon, close to deep craters, where the presence of buried artificial structures is speculated. In these situations, the signal returns a few minutes later, but with errors in the telemetry records. Coincidence? Others believe that behind these disappearances there may be secret military tests, probes that were never, in fact, created just for scientific purposes, but rather to observe strategic targets outside of Earth. We know that NASA does not operate alone. For decades, it has collaborated with the United States Department of Defense on tracking, orbital espionage, and long-range atmospheric monitoring programs. In other words, many of these missions, classified as scientific exploration, may have dual objectives. And if these probes lost contact, perhaps they were neutralized by forces that did not wish to be observed. We must also not forget that many former astronauts and former agency employees have left enigmatic phrases over the years Edgar Mitchell, for example, the sixth man to set foot on the moon, stated in more than one interview that we are not alone and that the government knows this. Gordon Cooper also stated, in an official letter to the North American Congress, that he saw unidentified flying objects during missions. What if the astronauts saw what the probes saw? Questions pile up. The data disappears. The press ignores it. Science pretends not to see. And we continue connecting the dots, because behind the silence there is something pulsing, a secret, a limit, a frontier where the truth begins and where official records end. Comment below if you think Phobos 2 was dropped on purpose. Write forbidden zone if you believe that there is a spatial limit monitored by forces we do not know about. Or, if you want to go further, comment red dust protocol. Only those who understand will know. Your comment can help this video reach those who also need to wake up to what is behind the curtains of space exploration. For decades, NASA's official discourse remained firm. All failures, all disappearances, all silences were caused by technical issues. But the more the years pass, the more voices that challenge this narrative emerge. Voices that, for a long time, were suppressed, discredited, or simply ignored. We are talking about former employees of the agency itself, engineers who worked on specific missions, technicians who witnessed first-hand operations that never became known to the public. These reports, although often ignored by major media outlets, are key pieces in putting together the puzzle we are revealing here. An emblematic example is that of an engineer, identified only as KH, who participated in data analysis from the Mars Observer mission. In a restricted forum of former NASA collaborators, he reported that, before contact was completely lost with the probe, intermittent signal pulses were recorded, as if someone was trying to establish direct communication with the spacecraft. These pulses were not mentioned in official reports and, according to him, were labeled as spectrum anomalies and quickly archived. Staff have been instructed not to disclose any additional information about this behavior. The strangest thing: the technical logs of these transmissions disappeared days later, removed from the internal database without justification. This type of erasure is nothing new. In several other missions, files disappear from servers. Images inexplicably lose quality, and data is replaced with revised versions. There are records of images sent by the probes with full resolution, but which, when made available to the public, appear in pixelated, blurred versions or with entire sections covered by visual artifacts. Digital image processing technicians claim that these defects are not natural, but rather applied manually to hide specific elements of the photograph. In other words, it is not the image that failed, it's the addition you hid. In 2004, during a Mars Global Surveyor probe mission, a set of images were released to academic researchers before final review. One of the images showed an unusual formation, a perfect hexagonal pattern, in a rocky region of Mars where, theoretically, there should be no symmetrical structure. This image was leaked onto the internet and, shortly after, it was removed from all official servers. When it reappeared in the NASA database, the location had been clipped and the file name had been changed. Coincidence? Another case that raises suspicions happened with the Cassini mission while it flew over Saturn's moons. During one of the transmissions, a strange noise was detected in the audio track of the data sent. Technicians from several agencies around the world identified the sound as something close to a coded pattern, not compatible with any system on the ship. NASA classified the noise as background interference, but several independent experts believe it was an attempt at communication. The original audio disappeared days later. Today, what remains in the public archives is a compressed version without any noise, as if it had been cleaned. Testimonials like these have been accumulating behind the scenes. Former employees report silence protocols, rooms with restricted access briefings held without records, and even veiled threats to maintain secrecy about certain events. A former telemetry operator with decades of experience stated that there were automatic alerts in the system that redirected certain data captured by the probes to isolated servers, which were not connected to the mission's main system. In other words, part of the information was never seen by the frontline technical team. These transmissions went directly to classified sectors, beyond the reach of most of the scientists involved. Now think, if this is all false, why do so many? Reports follow the same pattern. Why do people who don't even know each other describe similar protocols? Identical occurrences, repeated behaviors within the agency. And why is it that whenever this information comes to light, it is labeled as conspiracy theories, without any real effort to verify the authenticity of the facts? It's not just what was said, it's what was hidden. These are the audios that did not reach the public. These are prints with visual censorship, where entire sections of images appear obscured without any explanation. There are reports with missing pages, sequences of data with holes in time, graphs that start from nowhere and end without completing a cycle. These traces were not created by bloggers. They are not a montage of social networks. They are present in the official archives themselves, available to anyone who has the patience to dig. Comment below if you've seen any of these distorted images or suspicious files. Write "the data disappeared" if you believe that these failures are not accidental, or type "to clean audio" if you think the noises were removed on purpose. Your interaction could be the link between this video and thousands of people who still don't realize the extent of what is being hidden. If space probes, with the highest technology developed by human beings, can disappear into the void of space, without a trace, without plausible explanations, and with files mysteriously censored or tampered with, then what else could be hidden from humanity? This question needs to resonate, not just among scientists or conspiracy theorists, but among all people who still believe they deserve to know the truth about the universe in which they live. Because it's no longer just about failed machines. It is our right to understand what is beyond what we are shown. There is something deeply unsettling in thinking that, even with all the scientific advances, we are still trapped in the official, limited, filtered narrative. A narrative that, intentionally or not, avoids the most uncomfortable questions. What did these probes see? What was captured before the signal dropped? What is present in the edited images, the suppressed audio, the hidden documents? And, most importantly, why is there still so much resistance to talking about this openly? The issue goes far beyond curiosity. It touches on an essential point of human existence, the search for answers. Since the first steps of civilization, we have looked to the sky in search of meaning, trying to understand our place in the cosmos. And now, when we have the technology to reach other worlds, when probes travel millions of miles to explore Mars, Saturn's moons, asteroids, and deep reaches of space, now we are being told not to ask questions. It is exactly at this point that fear mixes with hope, because deep down, we all want to believe that there is something beyond, that we are not alone, that there are other forms of life, other intelligences, other civilizations that, in some way, share this vast universe with us. But the fear lies in the fact that perhaps someone already knows this and keep this information under lock and key. Maybe it's not a matter of we haven't figured it out yet. Maybe the real problem is we found out, but we chose not to tell. What if it's true? What if contacts have already happened? What if signals have already been received? What if, in some undocumented mission, or in some leak that no one had time to archive, confirmation has already happened? That would change absolutely everything. It would change science, philosophy, religion, politics, economics. The simple recognition that we are not alone would be enough to cause a cultural collapse. And maybe, just maybe, That's exactly why everything continues to be hidden, disguised, censored. But the truth has a weight that no lie can sustain for long. No matter how many people delete files, edit images, silence voices, the truth always slips through the cracks, always finds a way to emerge. Even if disguised, even if fragmented, even if incomplete, it is there. In the gaps, in the silences. Between the lines of technical reports, in the careful words of former astronauts who, out of fear or ethics, say less than they would like. And in the middle of all this, there is us. Ordinary people who do not have access to secret NASA rooms, nor to encrypted codes from military satellites. But we have something even more powerful: the instinct to question, the desire to know. And that's why content like this bothers so much, because they don't accept silence for an answer. They poke, they provoke, they raise hypotheses that are disturbing precisely because they make too much sense to ignore. Are we alone? This is a question that carries centuries of speculation, literature, religion, and science. But perhaps the more correct question today is, do you want us to believe that we are alone? Because cosmic solitude serves a purpose. It reinforces the feeling of control. If there is no one out there, if we are unique, then everything is under human rule. But if there is something beyond, if there are other forms of life, then we are not at the top of the chain. And for many, this is simply unacceptable. Now imagine the emotional impact of all this. Think about the implications of living in a world where truth is fragmented, where discoveries are filtered, and where knowledge is treated as private property. Think about the feeling of helplessness this generates. In the frustration of those who dream of the stars, but only have access to disconnected pieces of reality. And at the same time, think about hope. Because as long as there are those who question, those who investigate, those who share, the truth continues to live. Comment below if you've ever felt like they're hiding something much bigger from us. Write, "We are not alone," if you believe that there is life beyond Earth, or leave the phrase, "The truth slips through the cracks" in the comments if you understand that silence actually says much more than we imagine. Every comment from you helps this content reach further, and perhaps awakens someone else who is still sleeping. Given everything we've seen so far, the unexplained disappearances, the censored files, the blurred images, the reports from former NASA employees, and the supposed failures that coincide with key moments in the missions, it's increasingly difficult to believe that we're just dealing with technical errors. There is a clear line drawn between what is disclosed and what is intentionally hidden. And this line separates not only the data, but also the truth. The disappearance of these probes is not an isolated phenomenon. It is not an occasional accident. It is a pattern that repeats itself with surgical precision. Always at a time when these ships are about to reach strategic regions, capture unprecedented images, or transmit data that could change our understanding of other planets, especially Mars. Always accompanied by cold technical notes which inform but do not explain, that communicate but do not reveal. And stranger than the disappearance of the probes is the disappearance of the questions. Why doesn't the press demand answers? Why? Are the reports incomplete? Why do the original audios disappear and the images reach the public already edited? What is the criteria for deciding what can and cannot be shown? Everything indicates that there is strict control over information, a filter, a narrative that needs to be maintained, even if, to do so, pieces of the truth are left behind. And if there is anything we have learned from these events, it is that space, contrary to what we are led to believe, is not a neutral environment. He is strategic, disputed, and, in some cases, prohibited. So, given all these coincidences, 'tis impossible not to ask, did these probes fail, or were they silenced? Were they simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or were they in the right place, about to reveal what shouldn't be revealed. And that's exactly why this video needs to go further. Because in the next investigations, we will access materials that were not made for the public. Leaked documents, ignored records, testimonies that were buried for years. All of this could change the way we see Mars and how we understand NASA's true role in exploring the unknown. If this video impacted you in any way, if it made you think, question, or see space exploration with new eyes, then you are part of a rare group, the group that does not accept the first version of the story. And if you've come this far, it's because you're ready to go deeper. So take advantage of this moment and subscribe to the channel now. Here, we investigate what they hide, connect the dots that no one comments on, and give voice to what has been silenced. Each new video is another piece of this cosmic puzzle dot, and if you stayed until the end, comment below. I see beyond what they show. This phrase shows that you are with us on this journey for real answers. And more than that, it helps this content reach others who, like you, already understand that the truth does not come ready. It needs to be sought, and now that you've seen what could be behind the probe's disappearance, it's time to move on to the next revelation. In the next video, you will understand why more and more experts believe that NASA has already contacted extraterrestrial civilizations. There are records, there are signs, and there's evidence that has been kept from the public for too long.